Losing a job takes about 5 minutes. A phone call, an email, a walk to a manager's office. Finding a new one takes, on average, 5 months. And somewhere in that 5-month gap is an entire hidden economy most people never think about until they're standing in the middle of it. This isn't just a story about being unemployed. It's a story about a machine with moving parts. A machine that costs trillions of dollars a year to run. A machine most people only discover exists the day they stop getting a paycheck. And the scariest part about unemployment isn't losing the job. It's what happens in the 6 months after. Quick and honest, before we get into it, if you're into stories like this, real financial history actually explained, hit subscribe now. It costs you nothing, and it genuinely helps this channel keep making them. Okay, back to the machine. The cost of nothing. Let's start with a number that sounds almost fake. In a typical year, unemployment costs the U.S. economy hundreds of billions of dollars. Not because people aren't trying, because idle labor is, economically speaking, a wasted resource. The same way an empty office building or a parked delivery truck is a wasted resource. Every unemployed worker represents wages that never got spent, taxes that never got paid, and goods and services that never got produced. Meet Dave. Not a real person, just the average unemployed American, statistically speaking. Dave worked in logistics for 11 years. Then, on a Tuesday, his company restructured, and Dave became a line item on a spreadsheet labeled Workforce Optimization. I don't understand. My reviews were good. Your reviews don't matter, Dave. The org chart matters. Dave's story multiplies by the millions, and each version of Dave costs the economy in ways most people never calculate. His mortgage payment doesn't happen, his car payment doesn't happen, the restaurant down the street from his old office loses a regular customer at lunch. The tax revenue his salary used to generate evaporates instantly, but the government's expenses don't shrink to match. In fact, they grow because now Dave might need to file for unemployment insurance, which is itself funded by taxes on the very companies still employing people. It's a system built to catch people falling, funded by everyone else still standing. Zoom out further. When a recession hits and unemployment spikes from 4% to 10%, that's not just millions of individual tragedies stacked on top of each other, though it absolutely is that too. It's also a measurable, calculable hole in GDP. Economists have a name for it, the output gap, the difference between what an economy could produce at full employment and what it actually produces when a chunk of its workforce is sitting on the sidelines. During the 2008 financial crisis, that gap ran into the trillions of dollars, cumulative, over years. Money that simply never got made because the people who would have made it were home, refreshing job boards instead. And here's the twist nobody tells you when you lose a job. The cost isn't just what you don't earn, it's what you have to spend to try to earn again. Gas money to drive to interviews, a new suit because your old one doesn't fit the same after 6 months of stress and skipped meals, a subscription to a resume writing service, coffee, so many coffees, bought specifically to have networking chats with people who might, maybe, possibly know someone who's hiring. Unemployment isn't free. It's one of the most expensive things that can happen to a person, and it comes with zero income to pay for it.
The numbers game. Here's where it gets darker and weirder. The unemployment rate you hear on the news, the headline number, the one politicians love to quote, it's called U3. And U3 is, by design, an incomplete picture. Unemployment's down to 4%. Great news, right? Depends who you ask. U3 only counts people who are actively looking for work and haven't found any in the last 4 weeks. Sounds reasonable, except it means the moment Dave gives up, the moment he stops applying because he's applied to 300 jobs and heard back from 4, he's not counted as unemployed anymore. He's just gone, vanished from the statistic entirely, filed under a different category, not in the labor force, discouraged, a ghost in the numbers.
There's a broader measure, U6, that tries to capture more of reality. It includes people who've given up looking recently and people working part-time who desperately want full-time work but can't find it. U6 is almost always meaningfully higher than U3, sometimes nearly double. During downturns, that gap widens even more, which means the headline number you hear on television is quite literally the rosiest possible version of the truth. Then there's the labor force participation rate, a number almost nobody outside of economics departments actually understands, but one that quietly does a lot of heavy lifting in hiding bad news. If enough people simply stop looking for work entirely, retire early, go on disability, move in with parents, the unemployment rate can go down, even while the actual number of people without jobs goes up. It's a magic trick performed with math. The pie doesn't get bigger. The slice everyone's measuring just gets smaller.
Why does this matter? Because policy gets built on these numbers. Interest rate decisions, stimulus packages, political campaigns won or lost on a single decimal point. And if the number everyone's using systematically undercounts the real scope of the problem, the solutions built on top of it are, from the very beginning, solving the wrong-sized problem. Sir, unemployment's only 4.2%. The economy's basically fine. Tell that to the 11 million people who quietly stopped counting. The psychology of the search. Here's something nobody puts on a spreadsheet. Job hunting is itself a full-time job, except it's one with no salary, no health insurance, no set hours, and a rejection rate that would get any other job shut down for false advertising.
Studies on unemployment consistently find something uncomfortable. Losing a job doesn't just hurt your bank account, it hurts your identity. For a lot of people, especially in cultures that tightly link self-worth to career, the introduction, "so what do?" becomes a small landmine at every social gathering. Unemployment correlates with measurable increases in anxiety, depression, and even physical health problems. Not because unemployed people are somehow weaker or less resilient, but because humans are wired to find purpose and structure through routine, contribution, and unemployment strips both away simultaneously. Dave applies to a job at 9 a.m. Dave, thank you for your interest. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. Dave applies to another job at 9:15 a.m. There's also a brutal irony baked into the whole process. The longer someone stays unemployed, the harder it becomes to get re-employed, a phenomenon economists somewhat coldly call scarring. Employers, often unconsciously, treat a resume gap as a red flag, even when the gap was caused entirely by forces outside the applicant's control: a recession, a round of layoffs, an industry collapse. So the person who most needs a break is often the one least likely to get one, purely because the system is designed to reward continuity and punish disruption, regardless of why the disruption happened.
Then there's the application tracking system problem, the invisible robot gatekeeper standing between almost every job seeker and almost every human recruiter. Resumes get filtered by keyword matching software before a human ever sees them. Qualified candidates get auto-rejected because they use the word led instead of managed, or because their resume was formatted in a way the software couldn't parse. Dave doesn't know this is happening. All Dave knows is silence, application after application disappearing into a void with no explanation, which psychologically is often worse than an outright rejection. At least a rejection is information. Silence is just an ongoing test of how long you can keep believing in yourself with zero external evidence that you should. The safety net and its holes. In theory, this is where unemployment insurance is supposed to step in, a financial cushion designed to catch people between jobs so they don't fall straight into poverty. In practice, it's a patchwork system full of gaps big enough to fall straight through. Unemployment insurance in the US is run at the state level, which means the exact same layoff can lead to wildly different outcomes depending purely on geography. Some states replace a healthy chunk of your previous salary for up to 6 months. Others cap benefits so low and cut them off so fast that recipients describe the process as almost designed to be exhausting on purpose, an intentional bureaucratic maze meant to discourage people from claiming what they're technically entitled to.
I just need to verify my identity, my former employer's tax ID, and confirm I'm actively seeking work in a format the state finds acceptable. I lost my job 4 days ago. Then you'd better hurry. And there are entire categories of workers who fall outside the system almost entirely. Gig workers, freelancers, independent contractors, the fastest growing segment of the modern labor force in many countries, historically had no access to traditional unemployment insurance at all, because the system was built for a mid-century model of employment: one employer, one paycheck, one clear moment of termination. A rideshare driver whose income quietly dries up because an app changes its algorithm doesn't get a pink slip. They just get fewer rides, and no safety net acknowledges that as unemployment at all. Even for people who do qualify, there's often a waiting period before benefits kick in. 1 week, sometimes 2, a gap explicitly built into many systems, ostensibly to discourage fraud, but which in practice just means the newly unemployed have to survive on savings, credit cards, or borrowed money during the exact window when they have the least financial cushion and the most financial panic.
The ripple effect. Zoom out from Dave and multiply him by a few million, and you get something history has already shown us in vivid, devastating detail. During the Great Depression, unemployment in the US peaked at around 25%. 1 in every 4 people who wanted to work couldn't. And the effects didn't stay contained to individual households. They rippled outward into entire towns. When enough people in a community lose their income simultaneously, local businesses lose customers simultaneously too. The diner near the shuttered factory factory loses its lunch crowd. The barbershop loses regulars who now cut their own hair to save money. Property values sag as foreclosures rise and fewer people can afford to buy homes. Local tax revenue shrinks, which means schools, roads, and public services get squeezed at exactly the moment communities need them most. It's a downward spiral with real momentum, one that can take years, sometimes a decade or more, to fully unwind, even after the initial shock has technically passed. The 2008 financial crisis produced a smaller but strikingly similar pattern. Unemployment in the U.S. climbed past 10%, and the effects lingered for years afterward, long after the stock market itself had recovered. Economists call this a jobless recovery, a period where GDP and corporate profits bounce back while employment lags stubbornly behind, because companies, having learned they could survive doing more with fewer people, are often in no hurry to rehire at pre-crisis levels.
Business is up 12% from last year. Great, let's bring back the team we laid off. No, let's see how long we can run it this lean. There's a mental health dimension to this ripple effect too, one that's harder to put a dollar figure on but is arguably just as real. Regions that experience prolonged, concentrated unemployment often see measurable increases in substance abuse, family strain, and, in the most severe cases, suicide rates. Economists sometimes call these deaths of despair, a grim clinical phrase for an entirely human tragedy. What happens when a community's core sense of purpose and stability gets pulled out from under it all at once, with no clear timeline for when or if it comes back? The way out or not?
So what actually helps, and what just sounds like it helps while quietly making things worse? Retraining programs get proposed constantly. The idea that if a factory worker loses their job to automation, they can simply be retrained as a software developer or a solar panel technician. In practice, retraining is slower, more expensive, and less successful than politicians on a debate stage tend to suggest. Learning an entirely new skill set in your 40s or 50s, while also job hunting, while also paying rent, is an enormous ask, and completion rates for many retraining programs are far lower than their advocates would like to admit. Then there's the automation question, looming over almost every version of this conversation. Structural unemployment, the kind caused by entire industries fundamentally changing rather than simply cycling through a temporary downturn, is different from cyclical unemployment, the kind tied to normal recessions that eventually recover as the economy does. A recession ends. The factory that got replaced by robots does not unreplace itself. Coal miners whose jobs disappeared because of automation and the shift to renewable energy aren't waiting for a recovery. There's nothing to recover to. The job itself, in the form it used to exist, is simply gone.
Dave eventually found a new job, 7 months after he lost the old one. Different industry, lower starting pay, no fanfare, no headline. Just a Tuesday, much like the one that took his last job away, except this time someone said yes instead of no. Multiply Dave by millions of people having their own version of that exact same 7-month gap right now at this very moment, somewhere in the space between one job ending and the next one, hopefully, eventually beginning. And that gap, quiet, invisible, deeply personal, and yet somehow perfectly measurable in dry government statistics, is the real economy of being unemployed. Not a footnote, not a rounding error. A machine running constantly in the background of an economy that likes to pretend it's always fully employed, right up until the day it very obviously isn't.